Guys, what's going on?
I love that music.
It's great. I love it so much. Welcome, of course, everyone watching here on Twitter, X, YouTube, Senko, any platform that you're on. I'm joined here today with the co-founder and CEO of Offchain Labs, Stephen Goldfeder, Chief Scientist at Felton, CSO 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗥, as well as the originator of Stylus, 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗂𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗠. Hopefully I said your last name right, Rachel. How's everyone doing? How are we all doing?
Fantastic.
Amazing. It's Bosefield, by the way.
Oh my God. Okay, there you go. I had to
No worries at all.
I had to mess something up. It's fine. It's a very exciting day, by the way, for those who don't know. Today it's a couple things. So it's Arbitrum Day, but technically it's also celebrating the launch of Stylus on Arbitrum mainnet. It's actually, the fourth year that Arbitrum did we establish this already? It's the third birthday for Arbitrum, but it's the fourth time that something exciting is happening for Arbitrum.
Yes,
the first time it was Arbitrum launched, right? Right. Arbitrum Nitro launched the second year, and then it was a Stylus testnet last year, and of course this year it's Stylus hitting mainnet. So very, very exciting things. So obviously, if you've been around for a while, then you guys might have been here for all that stuff. But we're going to be talking a little bit about Stylus today, kind of what actually went live today, what's coming, a little bit about some of the vision for some of the Arbitrum tech coming up, including decentralized sequencing, ZK proofs, all that fancy scalability stuff, as well as potentially Tandem that we had kind of mentioned a little while ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago now. But I think starting off, definitely want to make sure we hit on Stylus first. Stephen, do you want to maybe give us an idea of what Stylus is and what developers can now do on Arbitrum mainnet?
Yes, I would love to. And I'm so glad to be joined by Ed, Rachel, and AJ here as well, because we can get into so many different details and so many different angles here into real depth. But as a general overview, the reason I'm excited about Stylus is if you look at the number of Solidity developers today, it's something in the tens of thousands. If you look at the number of Rust developers, it's more like 3 million. And if you look at the number of C and C++ developers, it's like 12 million. And what that means is if you look at where blockchain development is today and where we're going, or the community that we're targeting today and the community that we're now opening up to, it turns out that these other languages just enable so much more. So Stylus gives you the ability to write contracts in other languages. Rust initially is the most well supported, but also C and C++. And really over time, other languages as well can be added to that. So there's already talks to add Move, for example, to Stylus and other languages as well. And there are three reasons I'm excited about that. Number one is the people. It just gives you the ability to onboard so many new developers. And the key to onboarding new users is onboarding new developers. The more developers we have, the more exciting apps we have, the more users we have. I've been saying this for a while. We want 1 million developers to get us to 1 billion users. And that's something which I think Stylus really, really enables, because there actually now are millions of developers that exist today that develop in languages that can be built on Arbitrum. That wasn't true 1 day ago. There weren't 1 million developers that even knew this technology, but today there are now millions of developers that can take their existing skills without retraining or relearning things and build on Arbitrum. And that is itself massive. And we're actually starting to see some of that today, where teams are going live today. I know Renegade Finance is going live today. We're going to see some of this code go live today that literally wasn't possible yesterday to go live. That's one thing. So it's about the people. The really truth is that while it's opening up and making it easier to get more people, if you're a team that has a good idea and it just meant you have to retrain to learn Solidity, that wasn't going to be a holdup for really motivated teams, right? Okay, so it just means you have to learn Solidity. That's why number two, I think, is even more powerful. It's the code. So even if you want to go ahead and retrain yourself, there's years, decades of code written in these other languages that is optimized code for all sorts of things that you just wouldn't have access to previously. So even if you say, okay, it's fine, I'll learn Solidity myself, but you have to then rewrite all the code. And what do I mean? Like, to be specific, Renegade Finance is going live today, and they are doing really cool stuff with dark pools, but it requires ZK proofs and ZK proofs that aren't, some ZK proofs that aren't supported by the typical Ethereum precompiles. And it turns out that if you wanted to do advanced cryptography, so use some curve that's not supported by a precompile, use some other advanced cryptographic primitive, you don't really have the ability to do that on Ethereum or Arbitrum, Stylus, or any other EVM chain today. And there are two reasons for that. Number one is the code doesn't exist, right? So your advanced cryptographic library was never ported to Solidity. And reason number two is even if it did exist, it would be too expensive to run, right? Because Solidity for advanced crypto would just be way too expensive to actually run on chain. You wouldn't be able to do it. With Stylus, we hit both those nails on the head at the same time, because on the one hand, now you don't need to rewrite the code. You don't need to rewrite. You have a Rust library that's a cryptographic library, great. You have a C++ library, great. You can run that library directly on chain, and now you can actually have that code run it. And because Stylus is 10x on average more efficient computationally, you not only don't have to rewrite the code, you can actually run it, because now you have just an efficiency boost that came for free, an order of magnitude efficiency that just came for free. So massive unlock there for, I mentioned cryptography. I think this is also true for machine learning. It's also true just for take an enterprise, some industry today, maybe it's gaming, and they have maybe like a decade's worth of code they've written in C++ or whatever language they're using. They can now say, we can just take all that work. We don't have to start from square one. We can take all that legacy code, or take large chunks of that legacy code, use it as a library directly on chain, and we just have a 10-year head start. We didn't know that for the past 10 years we were building for the blockchain, but hey, look at that. All of our code is usable today. So number one is the people, and number two is the code, and number three, which I touched on actually as well, is just the cost improvements. So I mentioned those in the context of doing new and innovative things that weren't possible before, but it's actually, even for things that were possible before, you now have a massive cost improvement. So Renegade Finance is a great example. They're doing something that wasn't possible before, but also there are other DEXs, and there are of course that are live today. But it turns out that you can take code that's working just fine today, but actually make it a lot more cheap for users to use it, and actually pass on some of those cost savings to users. And I talk about cost savings. The other side of that coin is open up capacity, more bandwidth. So now you can actually get more computation, more smart contracts, more transactions, more gas, if you will, more effective gas, I should say, into the chain, because you're doing a lot more but for less, paying less, but also using less resources, which means the chains can actually do more. So that's a scaling factor, and that's Offchain's obviously bread and butter, which we're super excited about. So number one is the people. Number two is the code. Number three is the cost savings and the bandwidth increases, and that's obviously going to go directly to the users. Those are some of the reasons I'm most excited about Stylus.
It's very, very exciting, and I think it's the way that I kind of look at it. Over time it's kind of changed as it's been in development, but I almost kind of look at it as like a re-leveling of the playing field, at the very least from like a technological perspective for Arbitrum. Arbitrum's been out for, again, like over 3 years now, and it started off as a fair launch. So not to say that really, we're recreating the same thing that happened 3 years ago, but it's like, you're giving teams maybe that haven't deployed yet, or maybe teams that don't have necessarily that much of an edge yet, and even more of a competitive edge if they decide they want to try something new with Stylus, whether it's in Rust or maybe even a different language. I don't know. It's kind of the way that I'm looking at it.
Absolutely. And by the way, the thing we didn't touch on is, if none of this sounds interesting to you, I'd like to talk, because this is super interesting. But if for some reason none of this sounds interesting to you, you can also safely ignore it, because everything you know and loved about Arbitrum yesterday still exists. The EVM is still there. It's the best-in-class support for the EVM. It's fully compatible, fully synchronous. It's even going to be fully synchronous with my Stylus contracts, right? So if you like the things that are going today, that's all there too. That's the nice thing about being fully synchronous and fully compatible. You no longer have to say, okay, there's the Rust chain, which I can go to. You can go in Arbitrum and write in whatever language you want. So if for some reason this isn't interesting to you, I have a lot of questions, but no worries. You can still use the old stuff.
So Rachel, I think it'd be kind of cool maybe if we can maybe go back a little bit and just give us an idea of like how you even came up with Stylus. How did Stylus even come to mind? The idea of it, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's going back now, because Stylus is here today, but originally it was just an idea. You see, at its heart, Stylus uses WebAssembly. This is a technology that's in the web browser that's built for being able to run really fast code, but that's also really well sandboxed, that has really good security primitives. And well, after the launch of Arbitrum, I think if you guys remember when, we did the big Nitro upgrade and all of that, so originally Arbitrum is launched, and then a year later we launched Arbitrum Nitro, and that was like this big, huge step forward in terms of scalability and efficiency and fees and all of that great stuff. At the heart of one of the biggest reasons why it was able to do that was because it used WebAssembly as a technology, and that was for the fraud proofs back then. But once you've kind of dipped your toes in the water and you've started to bet on that WASM future and take advantage of these technologies, you start asking questions like, could we more deeply integrate? Like, is there more that one could do now that we have the ability to prove any code? What if we had the ability to run any WASM code? And these are a few ideas that had been percolating. We'd had conversations before at the company about or at Offchain Labs, about how these technologies might be implemented. And I remember it eventually dawned on me that maybe there was a way of taking WASM and using it to build fast cryptography. So I didn't yet have the picture in my head for the amazing smart contract platform that just launched live today, right? Where you can do anything, right? Like on the current Stylus that's just gone live earlier. As of a few hours ago, you can now launch these smart contracts that are in Rust or C or C++ stuff, and they're able to talk to each other and use all of these affordances that one would normally expect to only have in assembly, like the moving of ether or the ability to store state and all of that. Well, back then, I was just thinking, how can we make cryptography really fast, really efficient, secure, and provable, and all of that stuff using the same primitives that we previously had? And well, it turned out that this was a very fruitful thing to explore, because it turns out that the things that make cryptography fast and secure and sandboxed are the things that make general computation fast and secure and sandboxed. And I remember I was talking with the founders, and I suggested, hey, if you guys could just give me a little bit to prove that this could possibly work, right? Because back then, of course, this is just, who knows, this is all just an idea, but I spent a weekend on it, and I was like, okay, I think this could possibly do something. So then I talked to the founders. I was like, can you guys give me 3 weeks to just do this instead of Nitro? And that was quite the ask at the time, right? Because there's so much awesome stuff happening in Nitro and things that need to be built. But I really, really like the experimentation that the Arbitrum community has, right? And all the builders in it. We built such a huge diversity of products and technologies and stuff. And well, I spent 3 weeks on it, and it turned out to be a huge success. We were indeed able to create WASM smart contracts that could be proven and stuff. They weren't quite as powerful as the stuff that's launched today, but in that was the seed of what then eventually developed, and we built the team around it, and then eventually it took off. And through the efforts of a ton of people who've poured countless hours into it, many of which aren't here with us today. They're hard at work working on the Stylus network and stuff, or on the Arbitrum network and stuff. But through a bunch of people working on it, we eventually turned it into something that we presented last year, and now has been made live today. So a bit of a long story, but that's how it was. It was originally just an idea, a weekend project, not too unlike how Arbitrum Nitro was a weekend project, but then eventually proven and implemented and iterated on until finally we had something that could really usher in the next generation of applications and smart contract development patterns.
That's insane. And I definitely just want to highlight that it was a weekend project, as was Arbitrum Nitro. That's pretty insane. 2 core things to the stack are pretty much, yeah, that started off as weekend projects are now very core to what makes Arbitrum.
And there will be many more.
I hope so. I think we need to give more people more time, more weekends off to do more stuff, I guess, on the side is what the takeaway is what it sounds like. I guess the other thing I'm curious maybe about hearing some of y'all's thoughts on is, so obviously we have, Rachel, as you said, Stylus, when you guys first came up with it, looked a lot different than, at least looked different than it is, than what's launched on Arbitrum today. How do we think Stylus will evolve from today? The state of Stylus today, maybe a couple months in, a year from now. I would assume differing kind of languages being available is one thing, but I'm curious on kind of your take and maybe what you hope to see with Stylus now on mainnet.
Yeah, definitely happy to share some hopes and dreams on this. I think there's so much amazing stuff that people are working on, both at Offchain Labs, in the Arbitrum community. There's a lot of amazing applications being built that are proving these technologies, like Renegade, as Stephen brought up earlier. There's of course going to be more programming languages, and something I think that's really cool about it, actually, by the way, is Stylus, because it uses WASM, that WebAssembly technology I keep referring to. This has really become a standard in not just in cryptocurrency, but in tech generally, right? Like all these different big industry players like Apple and Microsoft, Google, et cetera, they're using WebAssembly. And because of that, you don't have to work at a specific company or something to start making smart contract support for different languages. Like anyone can just write, say, a Zig interface for it, and then all of a sudden start deploying smart contracts in Zig. So like anyone could do this stuff, and I invite you to give it a shot. It's surprisingly straightforward because WebAssembly has become such a mature and flexible technology. The other things I look forward to that I'm sure people are working on is stuff around, well, of course, increasing the scale, increasing the ability to do more instruction sets and SIMD and parallelized block codes and stuff. I'll let other people discuss the things they're working on right now. But I see this as a huge step, but not the last one, right? Like there's so much that can be built on top of the future that we have.
Yeah, I think there's a big unlock that comes from the way that Stylus opens up advanced cryptography. There's lots of examples of this. People building innovative types of ZK proving based technologies, whether it's a chain or an application, things like fully homomorphic encryption, secure multi-party computation. These require heavyweight cryptographic operations that are just too much for the standard Ethereum EVM model to handle. And all of this gets unlocked by Stylus. And so I think we're going to see people doing a lot of innovative things, number one. And number two, we're going to see people building libraries and components that can be shared and reused across the Arbitrum dev community that really sort of take the level of sophistication in terms of integrating cryptography with the blockchain to a new level. And the ability to do this and to do this in a way that just fits together with existing EVM model and the EVM-based applications, I think is really going to be exciting.
Yeah, and I think, I guess, just to even dive into that a little more, I think probably what is the coolest thing to me about Stylus that I actually only realized recently is that you can have you don't need to just pick whether you're writing in Solidity or writing in Rust or another language and kind of deploy a smart contract that way. You can kind of essentially deploy smart contracts with a hybrid of both languages or multiple different languages, I guess, in this case, which is really cool. You can kind of pick and choose which parts of your project, your app, essentially, can essentially run with Stylus versus having to pick one or the other. It's really, really cool. I think the composability of it is probably going to be the most underrated aspect of it. And I hope to see a lot of devs hopefully leverage that with their apps like Superposition. And I think you mentioned Renegade, I think, who also, if they're not live yet, will probably be launching pretty soon.
Yeah. And not only this, but there is the ability to upgrade existing EVM contracts into Stylus in a seamless way. If you're using as sort of the standard proxy upgrade pattern in developing your application, there's nice support in the Stylus SDK for actually upgrading one of your EVM contracts or libraries into Stylus to unlock that speed and low cost in a way that is completely invisible to your users, except that the fees go down.
Right. Which obviously
I think it's also, it's a good point to zero in on these composability, the idea of composability. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah,
go for it. You're good.
I think I got cut a lot. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got cut off there. Can you hear me?
You back?
Good to go, Steven. Good to go.
We hear you great.
Yes. I'm not sure. I'm going to talk. If I'm not back, just tell me.
Yeah.
Basically,
Go ahead.
I think there's like a
Okay,
little bit of a lag.
basically, I
That's
think
why.
that it's I think that's what it is. Okay. Uh, basically, I think that's a really good point to zero in on, which is the composability here is what's really unique, because there are blockchain environments that like do Rust and they support Rust, and there are blockchain environments that support other languages, and some of them are really, really cool and innovative languages, like Move on Sui and Athos is a good example. But traditionally, you'd have to choose your language, and with that, you'd be choosing your blockchain. And by choosing your blockchain, it's choosing your ecosystem and choosing who you're resident with, and what type of apps you're with, and what liquidity you have access to. But this is like what's really different. As Ed said, you can have, you can be an EVM Solidity contract, an Arbitrum today, and actually upgrade your contract to Stylus to use some of these features. So maybe like there's like some part, or update part of your contract. Maybe there's like some part of your contract that's like expensive today, or some part of your application that's expensive today. And you say, hey, I can like just fork off this piece and do a Rust call there, and it's going to be a lot cheaper by using Rust library. You can do that. And the composability and the interoperability, both between different contracts, between EVM and Rust, but also between your past self and your future self, meaning the single contract that can seamlessly upgrade between these two technologies, is what's, I think, extremely unique here, and no one else has done. Rachel could probably tell us more about this than I can, but there have been those that have like had a vision of this before, right? So 𝗗𝗚𝗦𝗖𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗥 was something that a lot of people were very, very excited about a few years ago. It didn't materialize for different reasons and whatever reasons, but like, this is a very unique vision, and nobody else has accomplished what we've done here.
Yeah, I want to say something on that too. It's so important because like when these technologies tend to come out, right? When people are like, "Oh, I've got this new language that works in blockchain," it is very much siloed, right? Like you might have this really cool and exciting technology, but if you're starting from the ground up with no network effect, right, it can be really difficult to actually leverage its usefulness. But because all of this stuff is interoperable, right? Like a Solidity ERC20 exchange today can list Rust ERC20s or use C libraries, etc., without any ABI changes or changes to their code or redeployments or anything of that sort, right? Like the ability to just have all of this stuff seamlessly plug and play and abstract it away from the developer or from the user, right? It just all interconnects, allows this technology to not be off on the side, not be off on a silo, not have to bootstrap its own liquidity and network effect and user base. No, it's precisely the opposite. Because all of this stuff interplays, you can have the awesome dApps of today and of tomorrow use, whether in full or in part, Rust or C or C++ as parts of their code bases or as libraries or other services that they depend on, right? And because of this, this isn't like a opportunity that, oh, we hope one day everybody's going to migrate to this, right? Like, oh, everybody needs to rewrite all their applications, and then maybe one day we'll have rebuilt the same kind of impact and user experience that Arbitrum 1 has. Instead, it's the experience people have today and the liquidity that they have and the users. All of that gets to be shared, right, in this new technology. So I think that's just so important, right? Like if you've got this awesome Rust application or C, or pick your favorite language, right? I mean, it's really open-ended. If you've got that awesome idea and you're thinking, I would put it here, but how will I get my users? How will I find my liquidity? How will I, possibly integrate with the other awesome dApps that already exist in the Arbitrum ecosystem? You don't have to worry about these things. It all interconnects. And like how that happens, what I'm really happy to say about it is like, you don't have to think about it. Like we have, the Arbitrum community now has this amazing Stylus SDK, and it comes in a few different programming languages, and you can go try this out at home. You're able to write your smart contract. I'll pick Rust since, it's my favorite. If you write like your little Rust smart contract, it'll actually use under the hood the Solidity ABIs. That's the way smart contracts talk to each other for those of us who aren't as nerdy. And what's really cool about that is it means that like when your Rust smart contract uses a Solidity one or vice versa, if there's some dApp out there you want to link into, the dApps don't have to do anything special. It just all works. And that is a huge differentiator on this technology. It's subtle, it takes a little bit to explain, but it's the reason I believe this is going to have such an economic impact on Arbitrum. And I'm so glad it's not like some other chain or some other product or some other thing, right? Where with its own walled garden, it's all connected with the rest of the amazing stuff that already exists today on Arbitrum One.
Right. No, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, Rachel. That's like definitely, I think that's a great way to explain it. I think like even like AJ, maybe if we can pick your brain a little bit too. I think one thing that at least the way I also kind of see it is like you have this environment ripe for innovation, I should say, already like kind of filled to the brim with liquidity and people. Like how do you think as someone who's pretty much interacted with almost, I have to imagine, almost every project on Arbitrum at this point since launch, how do you think like builders will maybe perceive, I guess, this kind of a new additive innovation of the same great environment, but like just this plus of new tools to use?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that the early adopters are going to be people who are interested in building things that are impossible in Solidity. Kind of like we've been talking about Renegade, but I think that's a great example. But I think what's ultimately going to happen is people are going to look at these early adopters and say like, wow, they're getting this beneficial feature or getting this significant cost saving. We need to look at how to compete on that dimension. And you're going to start seeing, I think, natural competition between different applications who want to have the best user experience for the people that are using their projects. And I think naturally they're going to sort of come to appreciate what Stylus has to offer. I do think there's also a lot of work that has to be done to sort of make Stylus something from an education and developer tooling perspective that's accessible to people who are building, let's say, for example, in the Solana ecosystem. How do they have an easy port of an application, for example, right? I think we're not quite there yet. Hopefully we can get there in the next few months. And then ultimately it's, part of a broader effort for continued education for existing, enterprise gaming projects, et cetera, that this will just make their lives easier to be able to, tap into libraries like, C, C++ libraries that they use. So I think we're going to see sort of that trajectory. I don't think it's going to be like a one-day boom, the same way like sort of the chain launch can have. I think this is going to require teams making decisions around changing some of their strategy to be more focused on providing the best experience on Arbitrum for their users.
A 100%. Yeah. And I think it's funny because I think, these coming, from starting so long ago and now kind of having it actually be shipped. I think a lot of people, it's very easy to kind of just look at this upgrade, this update, and kind of look at it as only from like a technology perspective. But in all reality, it has very, very big impacts on like, potential adoption and like even just ecosystem perspective for potential apps that want to deploy on Arbitrum and for teams that are already here. So it's great that, this tooling is essentially now available for anyone and everyone to use. But I do think it's a great moment, I think, to kind of pivot a little bit onto kind of talking a little bit about what we released a couple of weeks ago, which is some of our vision for the future of Arbitrum technology. Now, there was a very, very long kind of Twitter thread or blog post, whichever one you read, about multiple things that, we hope to see kind of coming to the Arbitrum stack soon. But there's a couple of things that maybe I'll want to like double click on. We can bring up any others if you guys wish. But I think one of the biggest ones that I think probably has most people talking is ZK proofs. Now, historically, being, the leader essentially of optimistic rollups and kind of, the whole fraud proof mechanism to begin with, why do we think, ZK proofs is now within the Arbitrum roadmap of the stack, and where does it fit? Like, does it replace the optimistic ones? Does it kind of work with them? I think Ed, you'd probably be the best one to answer this one.
Yeah. Let me start with kind of the big picture because, and tie this back to Stylus. One of the things about these technical big moves like Stylus is that they build on each other, right? The reason that Arbitrum is able to keep advancing in this way is because of the advances that have been made in the past. So in the case of Stylus, the fact that Arbitrum launched 3 years ago with fully working fraud proofs, and then the Nitro upgrade 2 years ago, fully working secure fraud proofs for WASM. That was the foundation on which Stylus could be built, right? That plus some incredible engineering by Rachel and the team, and a lot of iteration and teamwork across the community made it possible. But without that technical foundation that has existed, and the fact that Arbitrum was early in delivering secure fraud proofs and on WASM, this would not be possible. So this is continuing, right? The big moves of the future in Arbitrum technology are building on what's happening today. And so you mentioned ZK proofs and the role of ZK proving. You know, there's been a lot of discussion in the community about the benefits of ZK proving, as well as the cost, and a lot of detailed work in it. But bottom line is, there is, I think, an important role for ZK proving in Arbitrum in the future, once the cost of ZK proving becomes low enough to operate at scale and at the kind of cost that Arbitrum users and devs are expecting. But I don't think it's ZK proving pushing out optimistic proving, because I think the sweet spot is a combination, a hybrid protocol that involves some optimistic, some ZK elements. Because what that lets you do is it lets you preserve this incredible thing about Arbitrum, which is that any validator in the Arbitrum system, acting alone, can ensure that the chain remains safe and makes progress. And with the bold upgrade, which we expect to be before the DAO soon, that will be permissionless. So it's really, if you think about it, an incredible guarantee to be able to give that any one user has the power to enforce the safety of the chain and progress of the chain using the resources that they have. And you wouldn't want to give that up. For ZK proving an entire chain at scale, that's going to require people to make some kind of investment. It's going to carry some cost, whether it is using a lot of AWS instances or some kind of special purpose hardware. That's not something that an ordinary user will be in a position to do at scale. You don't need it, right? The beautiful thing about ZK proofs is somebody generates the proof, it gets verified on chain, and you know it's good, right? And so the sweet spot is a situation where there are a bunch of parties who are able to and are out there generating ZK proofs. Your chain can, withdrawals from the chain can settle quickly. Cross-chain messaging can go fast. But if those parties are not there, if they have a bug or they collude or something, ordinary user can just step up and use the optimistic path. So I think we're going to see a move toward this sort of hybrid ZK optimistic approach. And there's a lot of work going on in the community to try to make that happen.
You're muted, Hunter.
You're muted, Hunter.
Wow, look at that. In 3 years, I don't think I've ever had that problem. Yeah, I was going to say, Stephen, I was going to say, it literally sounds like you wanted to say something. You're on to that. Go for it.
I did. So, two things just to highlight some things Ed said. Number one is, when Ed mentioned about these things building on each other and really stacking on each other, I think that's actually just highlights the importance of actually building things completely. So, for example, us building fraud proofs from day one, besides for the fact that that's important from a security perspective, it's also important just from being able to innovate like this. Because had that not been the case, and you built Stylus, you might have actually built it in a way that wasn't compatible, but by accident, not because you had to, because you didn't know where the walls are. You didn't know what your constraints were. Imagine if you're designing a car. I like to use car analogies. People know that by now, maybe. And like, you want to like redesign the engine, but also redesign the body. You kind of have to do those things in tandem. You can't like design a body and then design an engine. It turns out that the engine you want to design doesn't fit into that body. It doesn't fit into that slot you left. So it's actually important. You can't innovate in multiple directions at once, because you come out with something that's things that aren't compatible, that they could have been compatible had you worked together. And that's why it's actually important, right? So the invariant that Rachel had when Rachel was sitting down and saying, can this work, was, I can't break the fraud proofs. Actually, I have to make sure that, and today, you can not only fraud-proof EVM on Arbitrum, you can fraud-proof WASM. So all this Rust and C and C++, it ships with the fraud proofs that work today. And that's the invariant we keep, and that's what actually makes the stacking possible, because otherwise your stack's going to fall down, because you're building all these things, but they're not in coordination, and one piece is here, one piece is there. And so that's why it's very, very important. If not for everything else, which is also important, like all the security benefits, all the benefits of building it outright, it's really hard to innovate and do like groundbreaking innovation and really push the envelope if you don't actually know, have a solid foundation and know what your invariants are. That's number one. And number two is just general to your question of ZK, just to give you like a little bit of a broader view. Offchain Labs was never an optimistic roll-up company, and Arbitrum was never an optimistic roll-up, hard-coded chain. What our mission was at Offchain Labs was to build the best technology to scale Ethereum and scale smart contracts, and constantly upgrade and continue to innovate. And now it's up to the DAO what it wants to innovate and upgrade on the chain. But from the technology that we built, from our perspective, to continually to ask questions: can we do it better? Can we do it better? And you can see this throughout history, right? We started in 2021 with the AVM, or the Arbitrum Virtual Machine, which was actually years old. It went back to our Usenet security paper, and it was a work of art. And Ed's here, and he can tell you about the years that spent designing that. And actually, it was a marvel. But in 2022, a year later, we retired that. We said, okay, see AVM, that worked well until now. Now we have something much better with Arbitrum Nitro. And, you might think, like, wasn't that hard? This was like your baby that you spent years working on. The answer is not hard, because if our mission was to be an Arbitrum virtual machine company, that would have been hard. But our mission was to use the best technology available. And you know what? In 2021, the AVM was revolutionary. No one else thought that you could actually build a roll-up that supported general EVM smart contracts. It turns out you could. And it turns out in 2022, we knew how to do it even better. We were happy to put that aside. And today, we have an even better innovation, which we're able to do alongside the EVM, but we're able to upgrade into that. And then when you think about zero-knowledge proofs, our goal is always to be the best, give you the users and developers the best, the most secure, the most mature, the most cost-effective solution they can to scale a smart contract and scale blockchain development. And as you look forward into time, if you look forward 5 years from now, that has to evolve. That will evolve with we learn more smart people come into the space. We develop as a community, as an ecosystem, even as academics, and we're able to sort of say, okay, how can we do this better, and question our assumptions. And things that were the best thing yesterday might not be the best thing today. So we've always been about really encouraging that innovation and excited about it, and really leaning hard into that, and whatever direction that takes us. We didn't take a hard bet on ZK, and we still haven't. But if it turns out, as it seems that it may, that ZK technology has things that it can offer to make Arbitrum of tomorrow even better than it is today, we are going to propose those upgrades to the DAO. We're going to say, hey, that's something we can explore. And by the way, if it turns out that a different technology that's not ZK, also has things to offer, we can look there as well. And that's the flexibility of our team, and I think of the Arbitrum network generally. And as an anecdote, actually, you can see this in in play. If you look at the name Arbitrum, it doesn't have the word optimistic in there. It doesn't have the word ZK in there, or snark or stark. It doesn't have any of these terms built in. And the same thing for our company, Offchain Labs. It's about taking some of the heaviest computation off-chain to make on-chain work more efficient. And that doesn't say anything about optimistic technology. It doesn't say anything about ZK technology. Our mission statement doesn't either. It's about building the best technology. And that was, and actually today is, optimistic roll-up technology, but we're also constantly thinking about what that is tomorrow. And because our mission is about the goal, not about the tool, we have the freedom to explore different tools and say, hey, can I tweak this? Can I add another tool that will make this even better? And that's an incredible freedom to have. And that's, one which I am super happy to be a part of, because we're really not constrained by our beliefs yesterday. Every day that we continue to build what we're building, we think that this is the best decision today, because if we thought there would be a better decision, we're not married to any of the decisions that we made previously.
I think the coolest thing about all this is that, Stylus included, of course, like all these different kind of design choices / potential decisions, none of them are made like in a silo. They all have some sort of they all affect one another somehow. And I think maybe we can kind of move over to here a little bit. Interoperability, especially when it comes to orbit chains. My understanding is that even with potentially ZK proofs, including and of course fraud proofs, that'll actually affect how we can horizontally scale Arbitrum through orbit chains. Can you jump into that a little bit, Ed?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of desire from developers to be able to have fast cross-chain interoperation and to be able to do it trustlessly. right? Today, there's a lot of technologies for interoperation. They often involve trusting some party, some committee, some multi-sig. And of course, it's important to have those options for people, because often that kind of solution is going to meet the security needs or of a particular application. But we also think it's important to have the option of having fast and fully trustless interoperation across chains. And that's been an area where a lot of work has been going on. And ZK technology, when it's ready, when it's cost effective, can help with that. But there's a bunch of other work going on as well to allow chains to operate together as clusters, so that you can have, say, a set of chains that together provide an application experience that has more capacity, or a set of chains that have from different providers or different app chains that can associate themselves together and have fast interop between them. So that, again, is building on that foundation. You start with the foundation of the security and the strong and flexible virtual machine and programming environment. And then on that foundation, we can continue to innovate. And we see people in the community who have a lot of good ideas for doing this. But there's some really exciting things, I think, down the road to unlock very fast cross-chain interaction that's fully trustless across Arbitrum chains.
Sweet. Yeah, and then of course, before we move on beyond some of the Arbitrum tech stuff, because there is a lot more to even cover. One of the obvious things is, of course, decentralization, even, right? Arbitrum has been decentralizing ever since it launched, essentially. But there's still multiple things I think that can happen before the Arbitrum 1 or even the Arbitrum tech stack hits that stage 2 kind of status that everyone in the roll-up space talks about, and even beyond that. A couple of things just to mention them. You mentioned Bold earlier, Ed. Decentralized sequencing was one of them. And even multi-client support was something that we mentioned in our blog post. Do you want to touch on like any number of those things? I know you mentioned Bold earlier, so maybe we can skip that one. But yeah, go for it.
Yeah, let's start with Bold. Bold is the next generation of Arbitrum fraud-proof technology. Arbitrum has had fraud proofs since day one of the Arbitrum 1 mainnet launch. And even that was not the first version of Arbitrum fraud proofs. Arguably, the one that went live then was maybe the 3rd generation. First being our academic one, the 2nd generation was one that we had on a test net. So we launched with our 3rd generation. And this is Bold is a big upgrade, the next generation of Arbitrum fraud proofs. And what it unlocks is the ability to have validation or the participation in the fraud proof protocol be fully permissionless in a way that is safe and economically secure. And this gives you this amazing guarantee that any one user with the equipment they have can guarantee that the chain is safe, executes correctly, and makes progress. And so Bold is mature. We've been the team has been working on it for over a year, and we expect it to be before the Arbitrum DAO for a decision about deployment before long. And of course, along with everything else, along with Stylus and all these other advances, they're available to Arbitrum Orbit chains who choose to adopt them. So Bold is a big deal. It's reflected a lot of work. I think it's a big step forward in fraud-proof technology that provides advantages that other fraud-proof systems don't have. So that's the next step, and I think it's likely coming relatively soon to mainnet if the DAO decides to adopt it. What comes after that, and really the final step in the technical decentralization roadmap, is decentralized sequencing. And that is currently in Arbitrum, there is a single sequencer, which is only trusted to record which transactions have arrived on the chain. And this is, again, something that is really distinctive about Arbitrum. The sequencer is not in a super strong position of power in the protocol because in the original design, we built that firm security foundation where the sequencer only needs to be trusted to just record and publish a list of transactions that have arrived. But decentralizing that is also an important step forward. And so there's an ongoing joint project between Offchain Labs and Espresso Systems to build a decentralized version of the Arbitrum sequencer that has all of the great features that people love from the Arbitrum sequencer, the fast block time, protection against front running, and all of those things, but does it in a decentralized way. So instead of one sequencer, there's a committee of sequencers. And even if a bunch of the members of that committee are malicious and dishonest, they're trying to censor you or front run you, as long as there is a suitable majority of the committee that's honest, you get all the good features of Arbitrum sequencing. So that's well underway, that project, and the engineering work is starting. And we're excited to help try to guide that forward. I think it not only it will be a big step forward for Arbitrum, but reflects, I think, really nice example of collaboration across the community to produce something that's of value to the whole protocol.
Of course, yeah. I think decentralized sequencing was probably up there with, I think, actually having functioning fraud proofs for every other stack that is, on like what's most important for their L2. So then would multi-client support technically fall out of the tech stack, but still be very important to just like
multi-client
anyways?
Yeah, multi-client support is not so much a decentralization step forward, but it's an important security step forward and a performance step forward, right? And so this, so currently the Arbitrum Nitro stack is built on Geth, and of course Geth is the most popular Ethereum consensus client, and so the degree of compatibility with the EVM that comes that is available on Arbitrum is due to the fact that it's built on an EVM client. But there are other newer EVM clients that have advantages, including some performance advantages. And so there's ongoing work in the community to integrate Arbitrum with other clients, such as ones like Reth or Aragon or Nethermind, and this can increase the performance, the throughput, how much work you can get done on an Arbitrum node, and how much gas your chain can use. And that's part of a big push along multiple dimensions to try to increase the capacity, the gas limit of Arbitrum chains without forcing out users who want to run nodes on ordinary equipment. Stylus is an example of that. The fact that Stylus contracts that are developed in and deployed in WASM can execute much more efficiently. That's a big part of that. Multi-client support, the availability of other clients that may be faster, is a big part of it, as well as a bunch of other innovations that people in the community are working on. I think we're going to continue to see this, these innovations building on innovations in the Arbitrum space, and that's true for pushing performance as well as the security and programmability dimensions of it.
Awesome. Yeah, and definitely as someone who is a fan of running nodes myself, probably the nerdiest thing I think I've ever said in my life. I'm looking forward to it.
Probably not you've ever said,
but so to end things off, I think it makes sense to jump over to Tandem. Last month was kind of the month of announcements, it turns out, because alongside this kind of vision of Arbitrum Tech, we also announced Tandem, essentially a studio kind of allowing us to coordinate with different teams to kind of build stuff together. Right? I'm seeing at a very high level. AJ, I'm hoping maybe you can help me a little bit with that. Can you kind of give us maybe an explanation of what Tandem is and maybe even why launch it if we're already doing partnerships or BD style stuff with teams within the ecosystem already?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what Tandem is an opportunity for Offchain Labs to engage, work alongside teams that are, equally mission driven to us to build secure, scalable, decentralized blockchain-based technologies. And there are some products that, like Arbitrum and Prism, where we can be the core contributors and build ourselves. And there's others that, from a resource perspective or just from, other people's business models, we have a lot that we can contribute, but it doesn't make sense for us to forge our own path. And this is probably our first foray into being even more supportive than like typical, Arbitrum partnerships and business development and growth strategies that we've done. And I think that, just for some context, like the vision with Tandem is like, find 3 to 5 projects a year. It's not like intended to, and in no way will replace all the work we're doing with amazing teams. And that the efforts with those teams is not going to be diminished in any way. We love building alongside the thousands of builders in the Arbitrum ecosystem, but this is an opportunity for us to be able to dig a little deeper, to be able to provide resources, particularly on the research and product side that we typically can't, disseminate to thousands of teams and maintain any semblance of scale and productivity. So that's what this is. Alongside sort of that's partnership studio, we've also dedicated some capital from the Offchain Labs balance sheet that we're going to be, putting to work and deploying into projects that are building within the Arbitrum ecosystem and beyond. At the infrastructure layer as well, and we've historically not done that, and this is sort of the next stage for us as a company. It's being able to support amazing builders and build alongside them.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny because I think when we first announced it, there was definitely a good amount of inbound, I think, and I think almost to the level that it surprised us a little bit. And it's funny because I think our roots are very kind of ecosystem growth and very collaborative, right from the start, like right from when Arbitrum launched. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but Arbitrum was a fair launch. We worked with a ton of teams before day one for when Arbitrum launched to make sure that their experience essentially would be smooth for all the users when they kind of bridged over. So I feel like Tandem almost kind of comes full circle to kind of say, hey, like we want to be able to, obviously we'll still be working with any team that launches on Arbitrum, no matter who they are. If they're, they want to launch Arbitrum or utilize whatever tech, the ecosystem has, that's great. But almost like formalizing a little bit of that and saying, hey, like if you want to build stuff that isn't built yet, or if you want to kind of need to do something that just hasn't been even thought of yet, and you need the resources to do it, then this is kind of the idea of what Tandem is supposed to be. You think is that a good way of kind of explaining Tandem to a certain extent, or are you muted, by the way?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, no, I think that's right. There's so much that we can offer beyond, the amazing resources that we have for the ecosystem. I think you put it really well, and I'm excited. One of the things that gets me personally going is to go really deep with teams. To see how we can solve the biggest problems. And I'm excited for that. And I think that, one of the misconceptions that I had with people when we announced it is I think people were just like, oh, Tandem is an opportunity for anybody building the Arbitrum ecosystem to sort of, work more closely with Offchain Labs. And it's not really about that. It's more about like matching of problems and solutions and resources than it is about anything else, right? Like there's plenty of teams building the Arbitrum ecosystem that like our partnerships, business development, and marketing teams provide ample support for. And they don't really need anything else, right? Like, and that doesn't mean that they are in any ways diminished, but there are some teams, like they could have a very specific research problem. They want to solve something that's very complex, for cryptography or privacy or scale or, specific designs. And it's more about resource matching, in my opinion, and value creation, than about like, prioritizing like alignment or something. You know what I mean? That's not really the vision of what this is. Arbitrum is going to continue to grow, and it's going to be the behemoth that it is and maintain that. And this is going to be like, I think, a very valuable component of how we can contribute and create more value.
For sure, yeah, and I think as we come to the end of the hour, it's kind of funny because I do think a lot of this conversation, even though there are different topics, I do think a lot of it does blend together a little bit, and that obviously Tandem is kind of this kind of culmination of working with all these projects and saying, hey, let's formalize it and kind of build with teams who have who want to solve problems that maybe we can kind of help solve those problems with, but also kind of enabling these builders to kind of build essentially what hasn't been possible before with Stylus. That is, of course, now live today. And then, of course, that future kind of roadmap, I should say, Arbitrum tech kind of vision is only adding to the things that builders will be able to do and build because of it. So, in a very, very funny way, I think all this kind of, rounds out to say that, like, if you're building on Arbitrum, whether you started building 3 years ago or you started building today, there's still like ample opportunity to kind of create the next big app in Web3, or even the next big app in Web 2. And I'm really excited to see kind of what you guys are able to build, especially with Stylus now being live today. Very exciting stuff. But with that being said, I guess we can kind of close out here. Again, like I said, since we're at the end of the hour, if no one has any closing thoughts, if you're a developer and you're listening to this, definitely make sure to check out the the docs, the GitHub. There's an awesome Stylus repo that you can check out. Actually, there's a ton of tooling, example contracts, and all that other stuff that the Offchain Labs Twitter handle actually tweeted out earlier. And yeah, if you missed any part of this live stream, make sure to kind of rewind it and take a look. But that being said, I really appreciate you guys for jumping on. Stephen, AJ, Ed, Rachel. Yeah, really looking forward to talking with you guys again.
Thank you.
This was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Have a good one, guys.
See ya.
Do more
Bye.
with Stylus.